It's interesting to consider, that synesthesia has been at a kind of crossroads between art and science. In the 1880s, we remember that it was the poem by Arthur Rimbaud that really piqued the interest of scientists, led to several decades of studies of synesthesia. And just about 100 years later, in the 1980s, it was a painting by UK artist Elizabeth Stuart Jones that piqued the interest of scientists and led to a whole renaissance into scientific study of synesthesia. So as we see here, in 1986, UK artist Elizabeth Stuart Jones wrote a letter to The Psychologist, a magazine of the British Psychological Society. In the letter, she described her lifelong perception of words and sounds having color, asking scientists what caused these experiences. And Dr. Simon Baron-Cohen, then of the Institute of Psychiatry in London, took up the challenge, and he later continued his research into synesthesia at Cambridge University. So he and his team organized brain imaging studies of people who reported experiencing perceptions of colored words, colored alphabet letters, and he and his team found that something really different was happening in the brains of synesthetes, that there was some very unusual cross-activation between the part of the brain that we would normally expect to be involved in language processing upon hearing words, but unusual activation with the part of the brain involved in color processing, almost as if the synesthetes were experiencing words or alphabet letters as colorful objects. So back when this study began in the 1980s, there were not very many universities studying synesthesia, but after those results, universities all over the world began to get interested in studying synesthesia, just wanting to know the secrets it might reveal about how our brains can work. And one thing it has revealed is that every one of us, synesthete or not, is processing information in a way that is absolutely unique. Our neural patterns are as unique as our fingerprints. So as you see now, universities all over the world are studying synesthesia, have conferences on synesthesia. This is my kind of personal tribute page to some scientists who have taught me so much about synesthesia. And here are some of their findings. Strong synesthesia has a genetic component and tends to cluster in families. Synesthetic perception is spread evenly across gender. So when I first started doing my research into synesthesia in the 90s, what I was reading everywhere was that 5 times as many females as males experience synesthesia. Well, that turned out to be a kind of sampling bias because it seemed that women were just more likely to talk about their experiences of hearing colored words and colored music and so on, and were also much more likely to present themselves as participants in studies of synesthesia. But later, Julia Simner, now of University of Sussex, and her research results were replicated by others, found that it's pretty evenly spread across gender. So, another finding, synesthetes are 8 times more likely to work in the creative professions. We've been hearing lately about celebrities, right, with synesthesia. I was talking to somebody before my presentation began about Pharrell Williams having synesthesia, the one, the song Happy, okay? So he has synesthesia. He talks about his experience of colored music. Even Lady Gaga, I have heard, says she has synesthesia. So 8 times more likely to work in the creative professions doesn't necessarily mean they are better artists than anyone else, but it means they are very attracted to the arts. Now, as I mentioned earlier, another finding, all of us are synesthetes on a continuum from mild to strong. And also, synesthetic perception gives a picture of how the senses can work together and perhaps even substitute for one another.